Okay, we are in our Ubuntu 8.10 virtual machine, and I actually have the source code that we want already in here. So if we just go to Applications, Accessories, and then Terminal, and I can make this a little bit bigger. Zoom it in. You don't have to do this, of course, but just make it a little bit bigger, take up more screen space. We've spent a lot of time looking at a tiny terminal inside of Kali after all. Alright, so we actually already have the source code in here if you're using my VM, which I've encouraged you to do so. Just download it, and we have it already set up. But if not, the source code is in the slides, and you can also just read it off the video, of course. So we have overflowtest.c, and it is a simple C program with a little bit of a problem, as we will see. So it's pretty much as simple as a program can get. It doesn't do very much. So we have main. We learned about a little bit about C in an earlier section, I guess section 3. We learned a little bit of programming, including C. You don't really have to know much C for this class, but main will be called when the program starts, and it does take command line arguments. So the first thing that happens when we start main is it calls a function called function, and it passes the first command line argument, argv1. argv0 is the name of the program itself, so argv1 is going to be the first argument supplied by the user at the command line. So we call function. So if you remember our picture in our slides, we'll push that return address, so the next instruction to be executed, which one would assume would be the first assembly instruction of this printf, would be pushed onto the stack, and then we would create a stack frame for function, and it does take an argument. So inside of function we create a character array called buffer, call it whatever you want of course, and it's 5 characters long. So we will have 5 characters of space inside of the stack frame for function. We'll see we actually have a bit more wiggle room in there. There will be extra space for function to do its work, but we won't have unlimited space certainly. And then we have string copy or strcpy. So that is one of our bad functions in C. There's certainly not a rule that says you can't use this. It just, if we want to use string copy correctly, we would need to do some extra work on our own, and there are functions that do not have the same issues as string copy. Well, in particular, string copy doesn't do any bounds checking. String copy takes our source here and puts it into our destination, so it copies it byte by byte into our destination, and it doesn't care whether it fits or not. If we have, say, 5 characters to work with, we have no problem, or string copy has no problem copying 1,000 characters into those 5 characters. Well, that might not be such a bad thing, right? We would copy into the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, and then we go back to the first one, and basically we just loop around, right? Well, no, that's not what happens at all. In fact, it just keeps writing down adjacent memory, so we will overwrite memory next to buffer. We could even write out of the stack frame, maybe even overwrite that return address and even part of main, and we could even write all the way to the bottom of the stack and make the program crash with an access violation. String copy does not care. So, again, we could use that properly. We could do bounds checking ourselves. We could just add in a little bit of code that checks to make sure our input is less than 5 characters. But in this case, the developer doesn't do that. So that is going to be our simple buffer overflow example. As you might have imagined, this was very similar to the way I was first taught, or I guess it wasn't how I was first taught, it was the first time it made sense to me, so thus I have kind of started teaching it the same way. And then we will, of course, move on to examples that are more real world. Hopefully people write programs that are a little more complicated than this one. But we will see some real programs in the rest of our exploit development. But this is just, pretty much as simple as it gets. We can get an idea of what's going on and also see a Linux example, since the rest of our examples will be in Windows. But our main problem here, again, is this string copy, strcpy. So after the string copy finishes, function finishes and we return to main, which if the return address is intact, should send us to this printf, which will print out to the screen executed normally. Notice there is a third function, overflowed, which just prints out execution hijack to the screen. But notice that under normal circumstances, overflowed is never called. We start with main calls function just returns, and then we printf executed normally, and that's the end. Overflowed never gets called, so it's like debugging code that just got left there or something. So you can imagine our goal is going to be to call overflowed. So that's exactly what we're going to try and do.